What is going on, guys? Welcome to this week's edition of The View from the Front. Each week, I do my best to cover the news in a sophisticated, balanced, and mature manner. And as you guys know, my overarching goal is to unify our country. This week, we've got a ton of great stories, as well as some motivation and encouragement at the end. And honestly, this week's edition is so packed, and I'm so excited to get into it. I want to start with a couple of political points, but if you can hang with me for just a moment, you're going to see how this ties into a larger overall theme that I'm going to make in just a couple of minutes. As I am sure everyone heard, last week, former President Trump was found guilty of 34 felony counts. 34 felony counts. On each of the charges, the jury was unanimous on each of them. 34 felony counts. Now, of course, he derided the decision and called it rigged, said that he couldn't possibly get a fair trial in New York, which is, of course, where he's from. He also blamed the Biden administration for using the Department of Justice to come after him, even though it was a local district attorney. So these were some of the main points he made. This week, in a similar situation, the president's son, Hunter Biden, was found guilty of 3 convictions himself, also in his original home state, by a jury that was unanimous on each of the 3 charges. One interesting part of this conviction is that the Biden Justice Department was actually who was behind the conviction. This wasn't a local attorney or district attorney. This wasn't a state attorney. It was the Biden Justice Department. Hunter Biden could face up to 25 years on these charges, which is far more than the 4 years that the former president is facing in his felony convictions inside New York. Let me make a couple of other points on this because it bears noting. First, Hunter Biden also faces additional charges in California, which are also brought by the Biden Department of Justice. These are all by special counsel David Weiss. This was an individual who was initially appointed by former President Trump. Now, it gets a little funny here, but even though former President Trump appointed this U.S. attorney who became a special counsel, he's also criticized him. In fact, in 2023, he criticized him and said that he had failed to bring proper charges after a 4-year investigation, and that the special counsel was trying to move the case to a more Democrat-friendly venue. Those were the exact words of former President Trump in 2023. Now, I think it's worth noting that President Biden could have stopped all of this by granting a pardon before even the trial began. And this is something that we've seen in the past. In fact, we saw it just a few years ago with the predecessor to President Biden. Back when Trump was president, he granted a pardon way back before all the court dates happened and all the charges were fully vetted. He granted a pardon to campaign advisors and top political staff members, including Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Michael Flynn, Steve Bannon, and even George Papadopoulos. All of these were granted pardons. So I think, even without being biased one way or the other, you have to say that President Biden deserves applause for not intervening in this case, and he has now already stated he will not intervene that after convictions have been dropped, nor is he going to intervene in the case in California. I think you can also, without bias, give him credit and props for not attacking the investigation. He has not been talking about it day after day as Trump did with his trial. President Biden has been silent about the entire thing. And I think any fair observer would say that was the correct way to handle it. Let's get to one of the bigger points that I wanted to make. After the convictions came down against Hunter, the folks on the right had no idea how to handle it because everyone was so convinced that this was a jury situation or some kind of a fake trial and that he would never be found guilty. Charlie Kirk, who is clearly a very big voice on the right, even went so far as to call it a fake trial that would try to make the justice system appear, quote, balanced. And Charlie Kirk said, don't fall for it. And I was thinking after I saw that comment that I'm pretty sure that if you were Hunter Biden, you really would have loved for this to have been a fake trial because there's nothing fake about it at all. He is facing up to 25 years. He won't get that much. He may not get too much at all, but it will complicate the trial in California because he's going to have previous convictions, and over there he's facing years and years of jail time as well. So this case is going to impact that case. So there's nothing fake about this at all. What has happened is that the conviction has helped turn on its head the argument from some on the right that there's some kind of rigged justice system. And I say all of this because I think we take for granted the jury system that we have. I think we forget how just amazing our justice system is so that you can get a trial in front of a jury of your peers. It's not just some judge who's deciding whether you're guilty or not. You get a chance to present a defense and evidence and a chance to even testify should you choose. We take that for granted, and it's just frustrating seeing the attacks on our justice system on, honestly, almost a daily basis. But back to one of the larger points I was trying to make. You would think after seeing this conviction of Hunter Biden, after for more than a year saying it wouldn't happen, obviously pointed out former President Trump had criticized the selection of where the trial would take place. After all the criticism and after the conviction, instead of saying, wow, we were wrong, many on the far right immediately leaped into an even deeper conspiracy. I'm going to share a clip from Congressman Andy Ogles, who's actually from Tennessee, partly why I'm playing it, who was on with Maria Bartiromo, and they were on Fox Business. And I wanted you to just hear this crazy conspiracy that they're sharing, which I've heard others say, but I can't believe they're still saying this all the way into June.
And that being said, I think it also creates an opening for Democrats to slip someone like Michelle Obama in here. The Biden family can say, hey, we're going to take care of our house, we're going to take care of our son, and then allow Michelle Obama to come in and run. Because, again, Joe Biden can't win this election, and they know that, and they are desperate for another candidate.
I got to tell you, I am increasingly thinking that Joe Biden withdraws from this race by the time November 5th comes along. I am buying into what you're saying there because I agree that the Democrats are desperate right now. They are very worried.
I just have to laugh at that. It's insane, honestly. First of all, Biden has already run through the primary, received tons of votes. He's been nominated. This isn't something he can just suddenly step down easily. Political parties haven't been nominating people going all the way back to the 70s. So Biden will be the choice. Trump will be the choice. No one wants to really accept that, but that is the reality. Furthermore, Michelle Obama hates politics. She absolutely hates it. If you read her biography, if you read Obama's biography, if you read half of the interviews she's put out there, she didn't even want Obama to run for president either of the terms. She hates politics. She barely even enjoyed or pulled off the duty of being first lady. It was service to the country. She did not enjoy it. It's crazy that someone would throw out that she's going to suddenly just jump in, as if all these other Democrats, such as Governor Gavin Newsom or the Vice President herself, Kamala Harris, do you think these people wouldn't absolutely lose it if they just suddenly put Michelle Obama? It's just the amount of crazy stuff that's put out there, it's just mind-blowing. I bring all of this up, and I want to I know I've gone into this a little bit deep, but I had to set it up. I bring all of this up because we have to start getting serious as a country, and we have to get serious as informed citizens, as informed voters. The reality is within the past week, 1/5 of House Republicans voted to defund NATO. I mean, that is off the charts crazy. That is completely loony. NATO has been one of the most effective cornerstones of peace and deterrence, bar none. NATO helped us in Afghanistan. European soldiers deployed to Asia, well, hundreds and thousands of miles from their home to help us in Afghanistan. And people are talking about defunding NATO. People are talking about, not just talking about, people are voting to defund NATO when you've got Russia on the march. Are we crazy? Why are we allowing this kind of stuff to happen? We have to take this stuff way more serious than we've been taking it. Almost as crazy as that, Speaker Mike Johnson, the leader of the House, is finally facing some pressure for appointing 2 people to the House Intelligence Committee who absolutely should not be on that committee. They bypass numerous Republicans who have had far more experience and should be on that committee, but all because former President Trump told Mike Johnson to do it. Mike Johnson appointed 2 people who any reasonable, rational person would look at their backgrounds and say, these 2 people are too much, they're too much of firebrands. I won't even get into the past and all the reasons they shouldn't, but they are just political hotheads who should not be on the House Intelligence Committee seeing the absolute most top secret intelligence that's out there. And the worst part is Speaker Mike Johnson didn't even tell the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He was given no advance warning, just completely was blindsided because former President Trump wanted his 2 people there. Let's not forget that the Democrats did save Speaker Mike Johnson and keep him in the position he's in, because once he finally brought a Ukraine vote to the floor, following a 6-month delay, of course, but they helped save his job. But now it appears he's once again kind of going back to acting irresponsible, not acting like a leader who does have a lot of power. So I think you may see more repercussions because of this irresponsible behavior that Speaker Mike Johnson has taken. We'll just have to see on that. But I hear you out there. You say, why, Stan? Like, why does it really matter? It's just politics. It's just, Trump's the head of his party. It's no big deal if you put these 2 people on. They're loyal to him. They're pretty well liked inside the GOP. Like, how big a deal is it if you put a couple of hotheads on there? Let me just put this in perspective. And this is the top point that I've been building up to. This is why this matters. This is why I have led up to this point, because this point I'm about to make right here, this is what it's all about. This is how high the stakes are. And I'm not going to use my words on this, but I'm about to play a clip for you. Just imagine if we could have prevented World War II. And you might say, well, Stan, how would we have prevented World War II? I'm going to play a clip that I think is pretty convincing on how we could have prevented World War II. All the gas chambers, all the hundreds of thousands that have served in the United States and all the other countries, the dropping of 2 atomic weapons. Am I suggesting that could have possibly been prevented? Yes, and I'm not the only one suggesting it. I want you to listen to this clip. This is why we have to take this stuff serious. And when we don't, you just allow pressure and bad things to build until it's so big, you have to completely go all out to try to put out the fire. Listen to this incredible clip. This clip is from Timothy Snyder. He's an American historian who specializes in the history of Central and Eastern Europe, also the Soviet Union, and also the Holocaust. Listen to what this professor at Yale University said just a few weeks ago. I don't feel like his words got enough attention, so I'm sharing them now.
We're about to be in 1939. I'm going to agree with you in a certain way. My comparison would be 1938. This is 1938, but Czechoslovakia has chosen to fight. In that world where Czechoslovakia resists, there's no Second World War. The Czechs had a good army. They could have held the Germans back. It was largely a bluff on the German side. If the Czechs resist, then the French and the British and maybe the Americans eventually start to help. There would have been a conflict, but there wouldn't have been a Second World War. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, it was invading Poland with the Czech armaments industry, which was the best in the world. It was invading with Slovak soldiers. It was invading from a geographical position that it only gained because it had destroyed Czechoslovakia. So if the Ukrainians give up, or if we give up Ukraine, then it's a different Russia making war in the future. It's a Russia making war with Ukrainian technology, Ukrainian soldiers, from a different geographical position. Then we're in 1939. We're in 1938 now. In effect, what the Ukrainians are letting us do is they're letting us extend 1938.
There you go. I think that's pretty persuasive. That's probably better said than any of the arguments I've heard in the past about how Neville Chamberlain in the United Kingdom kept letting Hitler just take steps, because by then it was too late. This is one of the stronger arguments I've heard, so I wanted to make sure you heard that. But I can hear some of you out there. Some of you still aren't convinced. Throwing out a World War II analogy is a very big, very wide, massive thing to throw out there. I hear you. I see what you're putting down. I hear what you're saying. Here's just a smaller thing that I think we all can agree on. Just in the past few days, 8 suspected terrorists with possible ISIS ties were arrested by the FBI in New York, LA, and Philadelphia. That's like a pretty big deal. I think everyone can agree that's a pretty big deal. I bring that up because in 2023, a lot of folks on the right were saying we should defund the FBI. That's another just completely irresponsible, crazy thing to say. Just as crazy, though, I will beat up the left for a moment. These 8 men came across the southern border. And the thing that frustrates me is we all get in our echo chambers on the right or on the left. And when one side makes a good point, for instance, the right has been talking about the border for years, but because they haven't been consistent and honest about other subjects, the left and many people in the middle have just said, we're not going to listen to that anymore. Same thing from the other side. The left has tried to make some good points. People on the right don't want to hear it. I'm just saying from a larger perspective, we've got to start taking this stuff way more serious than we have in the past. We've got to quit giving either side, even if it's our own party or your party, quit giving them a pass. They are all falling short. Our debt is horrific. We're going to have to start getting serious about that. We've got to start getting in alignment on so many topics. It's just time we start taking this stuff way more serious than we have. There's way too much at stake to not do so. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we've got lots of news out there that I want to make sure you guys are aware of, most of which you probably haven't heard. Hey guys, just a quick reminder. If you enjoy the show, you've been listening to it for a while, and you'd like to support what I'm doing, there's a few ways you can do so. You can sign up on my Substack page, support the show at $5 per month. You can also do it through Patreon. I've got a link to that in the episode notes. And then finally, you can even just send a tip through Venmo. I've got a link to that as well. I really appreciate all of your all's support. The first topic I want to cover is a quick update on a story we've been covering for a few weeks. This involves that floating pier that was going to be used to bring in humanitarian aid into Gaza obviously just south of Israel, that has been connected again. It has been reopened, and on its first day alone, a total of 492 metric tons, which is more than 1 million pounds, 1.1 million pounds of humanitarian assistance was delivered through that single floating pier. So they've got it put back up, and as I said a week ago, I was a little critical about some of the challenges, including Israeli settlers stopping some of the aid. It looks as though that has been handled. So congrats to those in the military, those in the State Department. Also, U.S. aid is the one of the programs being used to help oversee this. And they're also working alongside with U.S. CENTCOM. So a lot of people involved. Big congrats to them because they are helping people that absolutely need this food. And it appears that, at least for the moment, it is back under control and delivering a lot of much-needed supplies. Let's move from that topic to some news about Ukraine and Russia. First big story out of Ukraine I want to make sure everyone is aware of is Ukraine has said, and the U.S. intelligence folks have now said, that it does appear that the Russian assault on Kharkiv has stalled out. As just a refresher, a week ago, the U.S. said that Ukraine could start using American weapons to strike targets inside Russia, and that appears to have had a devastating effect and completely taken the air out of the Russian assault. In fact, if you look on social media, you can now see videos of Ukrainian units, including police units, that are retaking ground that the Russians had seized. So that is certainly great news for our friends in Ukraine and for the West that was wanting to stall and stop that advance from Russia on that new front. Reminder, Kharkiv is in the northern east part of Ukraine, and Russia had advanced from Russian territory where there had not been fighting on the ground in the past. It was kind of a surprise attack, if you will. In other Ukraine news, Ukraine was very successful the past week and has managed to destroy 2 very expensive radar systems that Russia has inside occupied Crimea. Of course, that's the Crimean Peninsula that Russia is very keen to hold on to. Ukraine destroyed a Russian S-300 and a Russian S-400. Those are 2 of the most advanced anti-air systems that the Ukrainians have. These were big, successful attacks for Ukraine, and it's going to help open up the airspace so that when F-16s arrive, they're going to have more room to operate. These S-300 and S-400 radar systems have incredible range. In fact, the S-300 has a range of 93 miles. 93 miles. That really dominates the space or the airspace around one of those defensive launchers. The missiles on them are huge. They fly at Mach 6. They're very long. The warhead is 150 kilograms, which is more than 300 pounds. These are very serious weapon systems. The S-400 is even more advanced than the S-300. It is listed as a range. Of course, it's the Russians saying this, so no one really knows the exact range, but they list the range as up to 250 miles. 250 miles. Again, very large weapon system worth at least $500 million. They sell them or export them to other countries at $1 billion. That's how valuable these weapon systems are, or at least the S-400 is. The S-300 is a little bit less expensive, but they're very effective weapon systems, and Russia just lost 2 of them. While we are on the topic of air defense, it has been announced in several media outlets, including the New York Times, the Associated Press, Bloomberg, that the United States is going to send another complete Patriot system to Ukraine. These are the very capable and successful air defense systems, some of the best that the U.S. has. It's believed, Okay, so we're going to get into some gray area here because the U.S. doesn't like to talk about what it has transferred. So I'm just going to share what I've seen and heard on social media and in the media because some of these numbers are pretty well protected by the Pentagon. But it's now believed that once this one gets there in a couple of days, that Ukraine will have 2 Patriot systems that the U.S. has sent. That's a pretty big deal because it's believed that the U.S. has about 14 Patriot systems deployed around the world. The U.S. will not say how many they have in total, which are obviously based in the U.S., but it's believed 14, according to the Telegraph, British newspaper. On a recent podcast, one of their reporters said it's believed 14 of them are deployed around the world. So we will now have 2 of the 14, or 14 plus 2, 16 deployed around the world. Those will go into Ukraine. They will obviously be manned by Ukrainian troops, but that should help Ukraine a lot. It was also announced within the past week, while we're talking about Patriot air defense systems, that Germany is going to send a 3rd one. So Germany will send a 3rd one to Ukraine, as well as Germany is also going to be sending some of their mobile, what they call the Gepard. These are really good at shooting down some of the drones, but they basically have twin autocannons on them. Very effective. They're going to send some of those as well. So this is great news for Ukraine as they continue to strengthen their air defense, which they absolutely have to do because, as we have been saying the past few weeks, really the past couple of months, Russia has been successful in destroying a lot of Ukraine's thermal power stations. And as I said a couple of weeks ago, Ukraine is even having to deal with some blackouts as they try to repair some of this. So the West is trying its best to keep Ukraine from being in a very precarious situation when winter comes this year. One final thing about air defense. The country of Norway announced this past week that they're going to spend $257 million to help bolster Ukraine's air defense. And they're going to partly use that to help buy more Patriot missiles, which are, limited quantity. So Norway is going to be purchasing more of those to help make Ukraine's air defense even stronger. Now, before we leave the topic of air defense, Raytheon, this is the company that makes the Patriot air defense system, as the West has seen this threat from Russia, and as Russia has increasingly continued to threaten Poland and other countries, Raytheon, the company that makes Patriot air defense systems, this week gave the green light to speed up production in European countries of the American Patriot weapon system. So this is a first. They will support a European assembly line. It will be inside the Netherlands, but this is a first, and the company is saying that will help speed up production because there is such a high demand on it of the weapon system. And of course, that doesn't even bring into account the potential threat from China, but it's a great sign that we're now going to allow one of our NATO countries that we're allied with to help produce this, because even though we are ramping up our defense base in the United States, there's just such a high demand for some of these weapon systems that it's a good thing that the West kind of got this wake-up call by Russia before it was too late, before we saw how weak our industrial base was. We've ignored those warning signs for years and years, but partly because we were so successful during Desert Storm in the early 90s, everyone just thought that our military was so strong that we didn't need to have such a large size. We could reduce the size, reduce the amount of ammunition we had stored, reduce the amount of missiles, reduce the number of ships, and so we really started cutting everything back. But we're now seeing that the reality is deterrence is a necessary thing. As I said last week, if you want peace, prepare for war. It seems to be about the only way to maintain peace is to have a military that prevents countries that are aggressive in nature if you have a strong enough military to keep them in check, it's about the only way to keep them from making really rash and foolish decisions. Okay, we're going to wrap the news up there and get to the best part of the show, the motivation and encouragement section. And this week we got a few good ones. Here is the first one, and it's a great one. It's a simple quote. One day or day one, you decide. That is so good, isn't it? You can either in your mind say, one day I'll do this, or you can say, day one. Today is day one. And I think we all want to be people who say, today is day one. All right, so the next one. When you think of giving up, remember why you started. Such a good one. When you think of giving up, remember why you started. When I used to own my small business for 9 years, I used to always tell people as they saw me struggle, there were some really rough years to say the least. And I would always say, the riches of a journey are at its end. They are not at the beginning. They are usually not at the middle. The riches are at the end. And that helped keep me going. But again, the quote was, when you think of giving up, remember why you started. Here's the next one. It's just kind of a motivational top quote that I saw someone had put on Threads, so I thought I'd share. So this is just kind of a mindset to have. Things will improve. You will discover something better. You will have better experiences. You will grow and improve. It's just a simple thing, isn't it? Things will improve. You will discover something better. You will have better experiences. You will grow and improve. So often, though, when you're in the trenches or when you're fighting or when you're beat down or tired, can't seem to get any victory, it's just easy to want to give up. But have that mindset that things will improve. You will discover something better. You will have better experiences. You will grow and improve. Final one I wanted to share as far as motivation goes, I wanted to share a story I saw as just something, as a challenge to you guys if you see this opportunity. A lady who I would guess is probably in her 40s or 50s shared this. My neighbor, who's a mid-80s widower, dropped by this morning. He handed me a bag of tomatoes, squash, and cucumbers from his garden. I invited him in for some coffee, as I always do, and he started to say no, as he always does, but then said, okay, I think that'd be nice. We sat at the table, sipped coffee, and talked about gardens, the heat, our trumpet-playing neighbor, and other southern niceties for about 20 minutes before he stood to go. I thanked him for the vegetables again. He thanked me for the coffee, and I walked him to the door. He said, I realized I hadn't talked to anybody at all in about 3 days, and that's not good for me. Thank you for making me open my mouth. And then she finished by saying, we're having dinner on Wednesday. And that was such a touching story to me, and I saw it starting to go viral. And so I wanted to share it because, I often think of my dad and I go see him as often as I can. But after we lost my mom, he's there in the house alone. He often says that the house is growing on him and the walls start to close in, so he'll just go out for drives. But we all have that neighbor that's alone that we probably should take an extra few minutes to check in on, to speak to share a story. Many of them are sitting in that house all day, and I know we're all busy. You work the day job, you come home, you got kids and food you got to deal with, you got everything. But man, just that little bit of conversation in someone's life can do so much for them. So I'm challenging you this week, in the coming days and week, if you get an opportunity to do that, or something small or nice that you can do to someone in your neighborhood, that would be amazing. All right, let's share a few from the Bible, because as I always say, this book has become such a source of strength and wisdom and calm for me during the past year. This first one was just a verse I saw, I wanted to share. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own understanding. Think about Him in all your ways, and he will guide you on the right paths. Thought that was a good one. Next one is just a little quote I saw someone had shared. The quote is, God has already prepared the way. Now he's just preparing you. Again, God has already prepared the way. Now he's just preparing you. This next one's from Proverbs, chapter 16, verse 9. We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. Again, we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. And this next one's kind of a similar one, but I think we all fall short on this one. Stop overthinking. If it's God's will, it will happen, and nothing will stop it. Nothing will stop it. If it's not God's will, then God has a better plan. And I can say with 1,000% conviction that in my life, there have been so many times where things did not go the way I wanted them to, and God had a better plan. It has happened so many times that I could spend 20 minutes talking about it. But again, stop overthinking. If it is God's will, it will happen, and nothing will stop it. If it's not, then God has a better plan. I think that is a pretty good one to end on right there. Thanks so much for joining us this week. I hope as you go through this week that you act a little nicer on social media and in the world as well. Smile at folks in the grocery store, do small acts of kindness, and remember that most Americans are good, and they will help you in an emergency, even if you don't agree politically. As you go through this week, I want you to aim to be more motivated and more disciplined. Try to improve yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually. You don't have to set impossible goals on these matters. Just be a little more motivated and disciplined than you were the week prior. As I said earlier, I really hope that you spend some time in your Bible this week. If you have no idea where to read on your own, just start with Psalms or Proverbs. Read some of those, and then start with the New Testament by reading the book of John. Moving to a final note on the political front, I'm confident after this episode you're going to hear some bad news this week, or you're going to hear something ugly, and it's going to remind you of how divided we are. This is as certain as the law of gravity. But I'm begging you, please do not give up on this country. I know it's pretty ugly right now, and I know we're living in dark times, but we've made it through nearly 250 years together, and we're far stronger together than we'll ever be apart. Don't ever believe anyone who tells you differently about that. Let me wrap up the show by talking about my books and a couple of other newsletters that I do. First, a bit about myself and my books. I am a military vet. I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, all of that time in the infantry, and yes, that does matter. After my enlistment, I went to college at the University of Tennessee. I became a journalist. I spent more than 10 years in the news business. Besides all of that, I've also written 12 books. Those books include a series about a Marine Corps sniper, several novels about a police detective and a private investigator, and a few books about war, such as World War II and Afghanistan. Basically, these are all fast-moving books with lots of action and plot twists, because those are the kind of books I've always enjoyed reading. You can find all of those books in the link in the episode notes, or you can look on Amazon by just searching my name, Stan R. Mitchell. Buying a book, telling a friend about a book, or buying one as a gift for someone, friend or loved one, is a great way to help support the show. Now, I always like to end each show by reminding people that you can comment anytime. I try to monitor those. You can also reach out privately by email to me at authorstanrmitchell@yahoo.com. And that's in the episode notes, by the way. But again, it's authorstanrmitchell@yahoo.com. Hey, here's one other thing. This podcast is about defense news, but I also do a political blog. So if you love my moderate, optimistic views, you might enjoy that. It's called Thoughts from a Southern Gentleman. You can find a link to the episode notes to that, or you can just search that on Google. I also put out a faith-based newsletter. You can find the link to that in the episode notes as well. Hey, thanks for hanging with me this week. It's truly an honor to talk with each of you, and to know that there's a few of you out there who are listening and who care about our country and our military and all the issues that we face. I know there are a lot of scary issues out there, but we're going to get through them together, the same way America's gotten through everything before this. If you can at all this week, reach out to a friend or anyone who you know is struggling. Whether they are young or old, life is truly hard. We know this. But the true strength of this country is its people, and that includes you folks listening to me right now. So be a leader, be a doer, be a servant to someone. With all of that being said, I'll catch you all next week. You have been listening to The View from the Front. I hope you enjoyed the show.